Let me welcome our next invited panel to talk about spirits in the material world, physical health and digital media use with moderator Dr. David Hill and panelists Dr. Jason Nagata, Dr. John Brand, and Dr. Rebecca Robbins. Welcome to the stage.
Welcome. I am so honored to be here with the National Corn Growers Association. I've learned so much about growing corn. So now I am thrilled about this panel. When I talk about kids and media, and you get into the data which we have been swimming in today on media and mental health, it's really, there are a lot of subtleties to it. There's a lot of, girls who are 11 to 13 and already have depression, yada, yada. It gets really granular. And I love to pivot to the physical manifestations of media use in kids because all of a sudden you are on really solid ground. And so when they approached me for this particular panel, I was super excited because I'm like, there's so much to say and so much evidence here. And I am also humbled to be joined by three incredibly accomplished researchers in this field, and I do not want to take up any more time with introductions because they have cool stuff to say. So I believe order of operations, as I understand, Dr. Jason Nagata is going to kick us off, and then we're going to go to Dr. John Brand, and finally, Dr. Rebecca Robbins, and then we're going to have a lot of time for a hearty discussion afterwards. So let's go.
Thanks so much for having me. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about data from two longitudinal cohort studies. First is the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development study, which is one of the largest adolescent cohorts that studies digital media and actually has some physical health outcomes. So first, we wanted to look at weight outcomes in the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development study. And we did find that among 9 to 10-year-olds at the beginning of the study, screen use, as measured by screen time across several modalities, was associated with higher weight gain and BMI percentile. And some of the mechanisms for screen time and greater BMI are that we know that kids, as they're distracted in front of screens, they may be more likely to increase snacking and have overeating. They may also be exposed to food advertisements. And then, of course, time on screens may displace physical activity and lead to more sedentary time. The ABCD study also looked at measures of nutritional quality, including the MIND diet, which is the Mediterranean DASH diet, generally heart-healthy and brain-healthy diets. And overall, we did find that children who spent more times on screens were generally less likely to adhere to a MIND diet, so generally less heart-healthy, less brain-healthy diets. And I think that one of the complexities of screens and physical health is that for different individuals and different teenagers, the sort of outcomes can go either way. So on the one hand, one of the explanations for potential weight gain is that we actually found that in particular, social media and greater engagement in social media was linked with higher binge eating, so overeating in a short period of time with associated guilt, which is a type of eating disorder that's associated with weight gain and overeating. But on the other hand, we do see that in some adolescents, the reverse is true, and more social media time actually leads to more engagement in restrictive eating behaviors. And we also found that more social media and screen time was associated with a greater fear of weight gain, greater self-worth tied to weight, and greater compensatory behaviors to prevent weight gain, in addition to the overeating like binge eating and distress with binge eating. So I do think that one of the complexities is that that screen use and the content can actually lead to different directions. For some people, there can be overeating, and for some, there can be restrictive eating. And sometimes people actually have cycles of overeating and undereating, even in the same individual. The last point that I wanted to make why I think that screen use in adolescents and young adults is so important, brings data actually from an older cohort study, the coronary artery risk development in young adults cohort, which actually started in the 1980s. So it's been going on for 30, 40 years now. And I think one important lesson from that study is that it started with young adults 18 to 23 years old, again in 1984, 85. And now that they've been followed for several decades, one thing that I think was very notable to me was that the television viewing levels of these young adults, basically their levels in young adulthood set the stage for their behaviors for the rest of their adult life. So these are just the average trajectories in the cohort, and as you can see, from age 20 all the way through age 60, their television viewing habits actually were pretty much stable. So some of the behaviors that you may develop in adolescence and young adulthood really persist throughout your adult life. And when we actually get to more long-term outcomes, we actually did find that television viewing in the cardia cohort was associated with greater cardiovascular disease risk, like greater odds of obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and dyslipidemia 30 years later. And actually, because the cohort is now in their 60s and 70s, greater screen time was actually associated even with greater risk of heart attacks and strokes. So I do think that one of the really important things, we focus so much on children and teenagers, but we may not actually see these long-term outcomes until much later in life. And some of these older cohorts, even though they're focused on television viewing, which was the main screen modality from the 1980s, I think it does show that there are potentially really long-term significant outcomes that even could be related to heart attacks, stroke, and death. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. So I'm a trained cognitive psychologist, and it's really fun for me to be here because I'm a theoretical psychologist, and so my PhD was in a lot of modeling and stuff like this, and then I transferred over to the applied world. So as being a cognitive psychologist, what I'm really interested in is how digital media affects our cognitive mechanisms, so things like attention, executive functioning, inhibition, things like that. And then the second half of that is, how do changes in that, how does that affect our behaviors? And when I think about behaviors, I think about really two big buckets. The first bucket is our eating behaviors, so what things do we consume as a result of digital media? And the second thing is sedentary behaviors and physical activity. And I like to think of those two big buckets because I feel like they go together. And the way that I study this is by looking at advertisements. And more specifically, I look at how food advertisements are embedded in social media and the impact that has on social and that has on these behaviors. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk you through my model. Being a cognitive psychologist, we love our models, and so that's what I've just shown you here. And so, when we think about food advertisements and social media, there's an obvious connection here. So you think about what kids, adolescents, and adults do with social media. They're streaming, they're playing video games, they're talking with their friends, they're looking on TikTok, whatever it is. These aren't shown in isolation, right? They're always shown with advertisements. What I'm particularly interested in is food advertisements. They're awfully highly palatable food, right? So things like Oreos, McDonald's, there's alcohol, there's tobacco, there's other things, okay? And what we see is that over time with these repeated exposures, people get attenuated to it. So you're kind of training your attention towards these food advertisements. And the reason that's true is because it's evolutionary advantage. If you think back to the olden days when food was very, very scarce, right? It was advantageous when you saw a food queue in order to motivate yourself to go out and seek that food. The problem in the current environment is now that it's not advantageous anymore. Right now it's maladaptive because food is so abundant that we're actually eating when we don't need to eat. We're playing a video game or we're watching some food advertisement pops up, and it's like, oh yeah, I could go for some Oreos, let me eat that. And so the way this develops is through this incentive sensitization model of obesogenic behaviors. It's a reward pathway, so what happens is, I see these food advertisements, the activation of my reward in my brain system actually activates and it strengthens over time, okay? And so that motivates me to go out and get this food. So I see Oreos, I'm like, oh yeah, I got this big dopamine rush, but I'm not getting it. So I go out and eat my Oreos, and that's how I get it. There's another question you're probably asking is, well, what does this have to do with physical activity? Well, it turns out what we're learning is that context matters, okay? So through this this associative learning where you're learning that cues will give you a reward and you have to go seek for this reward. You also have to take into account that they're now associating the behaviors they're doing with that reward. And so what I mean by that is that think about what we're doing with social media again. It's always passive, right? You're always just sitting there with a screen in front of you. So now not only is that food advertisement being associated with that food reward you're getting, but also that passive lifestyle is being rewarded with it too. Okay. The way I like to think about this is there was this really great meme on TikTok. So I was raised in the 80s, and it started out and it said like, you know, you're 12 years old, you just got out of school, your mom won't be home for another 2 hours, you put pizza pops in the oven and you have your Super Nintendo. The next 2 hours is uninterrupted play, right? That's exactly what we're talking about here, is this idea that you're on the digital media, you're being bombarded with advertisements, you have that context that's setting your behavior, you're getting this big dopamine rush, it's all very rewarding. And so what my work primarily involves is I work with a lot of interventionists, and we try to see if we can intervene on these pathways, right? Can we break the distractibility? Can we influence the inhibition, the attention mechanisms, the executive function mechanisms to get people away from those, right? Because a big problem of this is that your attention mechanisms are automatic in the sense that they're really hard to stop because they're evolutionary based. And so what are the interventions that we can do to break those habits? You've been playing this or you've been looking at this for 10 minutes. Let's break into that and let's get you to do something else. So hopefully we'll have a good discussion. Thanks.
There's got to be a way.
We're blocked.
Actually set up a maze for us up here just to see how we would behave.
It's actually a test of sleep deprivation. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Robbins. I am delighted to join you all to talk about my area of expertise, which is sleep, and talk about the intersection of my field of sleep research. And David, I think, Dr. Hill, I think you made a great point on this being an area of highly quantifiable impacts of screens on our young people. So I have an embarrassingly long number of many more slides than my colleagues, so I'm going to try to go fast. It's not working. Having some issues, yeah. Okay, so bottom line, can't spend too much time here, but it's really, okay. Press a couple times. Sleep is vitally important for our young people, for their health, their well-being, and their physical, cognitive development and beyond. One study to tell that story. This is an activity plot. You see on the middle here, this is a sleep episode where there's not a lot of actigraphy. This is an actigraphy device. Those black lines indicate activity, and the lower lines indicate lack of activity or sleep, happening primarily around 6 p.m. and then ending around 6 a.m. This is a double plot, so you get to see really nicely sleep onset and then offset times. This is what we would call a highly regular sleep schedule. This is a young toddler of a sample of 101 that's keeping a very consistent sleep schedule. That's what we want to see in our young people. Now, compare that to a youngster that has a highly irregular, because it's really not, I have to just press like 6 times. Okay, there it is. Then this comparatively is a very highly irregular schedule. You see different sleep onset times. Maybe the young little one slept in about 2 or 3 hours longer than usual here, bed early here, 2 hours late here, so a highly irregular schedule. And we found that in this study, consistent sleep was a significant predictor of cognitive development in this cohort of prospective toddlers. Now let's bring this into, so again, bottom line, sleep is vitally important. That's just one study to tell that very important message. I have many, many more. But I want to talk now about 4 reasons why screens are so detrimental to our sleep and the sleep of our young people. Number 1 is screens emit blue daylight spectrum light. It's really hard to advance. I've pressed it like 4 times. Okay. All right, screens disrupt our sleep. There are 4 reasons. Number 1, screens emit blue daylight spectrum light. Until about 1970, we did not know what kind of fed into our circadian rhythms and kind of allowed us to become alert or alert and awake, or asleep conversely. Until then, we thought it was behavior patterns that predicted our ability to be awake or asleep, but Chuck Zeisler, the chief of our division, had the seminal discovery that it's actually blue daylight spectrum light. I'll talk about the mechanism here in a moment. Our screens emit these lights and these sources that emit, it's the strongest, what's called Zeitgeber or life giver to our circadian rhythm, telling our body and brain biologically biologically that it's time to wake up, exactly when we want to be powering down. And to show this very clearly in a study, average age 24, slightly older than the population we're talking about, but in a 14-day inpatient, highly controlled study. It was a randomized crossover design, so we asked you on certain nights to read from a book and other nights to read from a tablet computer. And what we found in this study, led by Dr. Seisler, Anne-Marie Chang, and others, is that those reading from the tablet before bedtime had a statistically significant, almost doubly long time to fall asleep. So it took them twice as long to fall asleep. This is sleep latency here, markedly longer in the e-reader as compared to the natural or the book condition. And the structure of sleep also changed. As you see here in the panel B, the dark is the book and the light circles are the tablet. And you see that the structure of sleep changes in the book condition. So when you're not on a tablet computer, you're getting more rapid eye movement sleep, which is vitally important for our young people. And this is all because of this mechanism here. It's a tiny brain region. You can hopefully impress your parents or your friends at a cocktail party. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's where light comes into the brain and sends this switch to stop the flow of melatonin. So when our young kids, our young people are exposing themselves to screens, again, it's a physiological cue to become alert exactly when they're trying to power down. So number one, screens emit blue daylight spectrum light. This is frustrating. Where should I be pointing? Is it here or am I pointing at the wrong, up here? Oh, that was working, okay. Screen time, to you, okay. Screen time is consuming. They're time consuming. It's simply taking away time from a typical 24-hour day. And when our kids are programmed and have school and activities, it's simply taking away from the time that would be available for sleep. Thirdly, content can be stressful. So we've seen, and this is research from Dr. Christakis, who's very involved with this organization. This is really frustrating. Could you please advance my slide? Oh, thank you. And what he found in time use surveys of 3 to 5-year-olds that screen use overall, so I'm clicking it like multiple times, guys. Is there like a backup maybe? I'm so sorry. Okay. Forward. Thank you so much. So in this study, we found that overall total time spent on screens was a predictor of sleep problems as the outcome here. Model 2, you see that evening screen use was particularly impactful for problematic sleep, and then violent daytime exposure was associated with sleep problems. Oh, thank you. Cheers. Okay, awesome. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. And then here we see that evening time was a particularly strong predictor of sleep problems. And then also here the interesting one is with or without adults. In the evening and daytime did not matter there, but whether an adult was present or not present in some of the violent media consumption, it was a significant predictor of sleep problems. So the bottom line here is that there is a strong connection between overall media use, contributing to that idea that it takes away time that our young people could spend sleeping. Content matters in some senses, and the time of day also matters, evening being particularly problematic. So they emit blue light. Time on screens is consumed, takes away from time that we could otherwise be spending sleeping, and the content is stressful. Lastly, it increases arousal. This is a study that was done in adults, and they looked at video gamers using a bright display or a dark display, abbreviated BD or DD. And what they found is in the gamers with a bright display, that was particularly problematic, but overall, if you compare the gamers to those not playing video games, you see a marked increase in heart rate here, a little bit higher in the bright display as compared to the dark display. We also see a reduction in sleepiness as bedtime approaches, and the control much higher levels, much lower in the gamer condition. And lastly, we saw, again, the structure of sleep changing, which is one of the primary hypotheses here, that Not only is the kind of build-up to sleep impacted, but then also the structure of sleep itself. As you see here, there's a reduced proportion of time spent in theta brain waves, which are the hallmark characteristic of rapid eye movement sleep, which is, again, vitally important for our young people. One quick slide here, one more study to show in gamers on different types of display, but compared to control. The bottom line here is just the small nuance between the dark display versus the bright, but you see an increase in sleep latency, the time it takes you to fall asleep, and again, the structure of sleep changing, so less time overall spent in rapid eye movement sleep. This study looked at a variety of media use. We have television and computer use and a number of others, separated by boys and girls and several age groups. The gestalt here is that all of the negative signs generally in the asterisks are around sleep duration. So you see each media use present in the bedroom is associated with slightly differential patterns, but overall reductions in time spent sleeping. One topic that's kind of emerging, getting emerging attention is excessive or addiction to online and internet use and sleep. This was a study that used surveys to look at sleep and time use in high school students, and they compared normal users of the internet, spending on average 3 hours per day, versus problematic, which was, per week, which seems low, but 3 versus 20. And what we found is that sleep differed significantly between normal and problematic internet users to the tune of about an hour nightly. The non-users were right around where we would recommend a young person be, around 8 hours or more nightly of sleep. More difficulties falling asleep, again, near doubling there in the normal versus problematic users, and then more nighttime awakenings in the problematic as compared to the normal internet users. Now, those with problematic phone addiction issues, survey research and university students examined these two phenomena. They found that a mobile phone addiction was a significant predictor of lower mental health, and that was significantly mediated by a disruption to sleep quality. So it's one of the mechanisms that's really underlying a lot of the problematic outcomes that we are working very hard as a nation to combat. What are some solutions for improving screen and sleep health? These are primarily for caregivers, but planning a bedtime allows for sufficient sleep. Having a time that you want your young one to be powering down, building in a relaxing bedtime routine, replacing screens wherever possible with calming activities, especially as we approach bedtime. Keeping all screens and devices out of the bedrooms, simply a significant predictor of better sleep as compared to those young ones with these media in their bedrooms. Family rules and routines around healthy screen behaviors, and role modeling ourselves as adults for our young people. Thank you very much.
Just to wake you all up, figured I would throw a microphone onto the ground, and that was very effective, so thank you for your response. All right, we are going to get into questions, and I am so excited to see what comes up. This is just cool stuff. So we're gonna see what appears for us. Okay, here we go. We got it. So, common misunderstandings. Ooh, I love this, and maybe we'll just go down the line. I'm waiting for upvotes on this, but I'll take the first one. So, common misunderstandings in the general public's knowledge of screens and physical health or sleep. That's pretty broad, so let's go down the line. Jason.
I don't know misunderstanding, but I do think that one thing that has been touched on a lot is, I think screen time is perhaps the most commonly used metric in the public. I think it's easily understandable. Many people with smartphones get screen time reports. But as has been mentioned, there are, I think, many other aspects of screen use that capture content and context or addictive use that can be more helpful. So I do think that perhaps just understanding some of the limitations of screen time, that their screen time in itself is not necessarily inherently good or bad. There can be educational and connection purposes, while there could also be detrimental effects like to sleep or displacement of other healthful behaviors.
I love this topic. I think the mechanism of a myth is very powerful because it says something along the lines of, did you think that using media before bedtime would be helpful? it's actually not. And that causes people to reflect and then realize the nugget of truth that you want to tell them. So I think from kind of a psychological angle, it's a very powerful behavior change tool. I've written 2 papers on myths about sleep, not necessarily about screens and sleep, but myths about sleep specifically in adults and in teenagers. And I think what I'm excited about in this area is that promoting sleep and healthy screen use are so intimately tied together because of the importance of a bedtime routine, because of the importance of being off these devices. And so it's almost like it's kind of could be a double whammy, but some of the myths that we see to be very powerful, or not powerful, but widely viewed is our beliefs among caregivers that my kid is not getting out of bed in the summertime before 10 a.m. and they are lazy. Wrong. Your young person is not getting enough sleep. Even if they're a healthy screen user, they're probably not getting enough sleep. And then screens are just detracting from that. I think the one other thing, I don't have good data on this, but I do have a belief that our young people, I think it's a myth that teens love screens and they'd be on them all night if they could. And maybe there's a kernel of truth to that. But I think that actually young people would benefit from, they kind of, in some cases, want us to put up some scaffolding. I do believe that we can work collaboratively to, I've spoken to some students that say, if I have a high school environment that doesn't let me use my phone or, talks a lot about avoiding screen use, that they actually like those environments. So.
I will add that as a practicing pediatrician, especially I could talk to all families about this when they're in, a lot of them think that their children need the TV on or the screen on in order to go to sleep. And that's one of the first beliefs that I interrogate when we're having this conversation. John.
So I think one of the biggest ones is that screens are making our kids, or kids prefer to use screens all the time. And so I just see this with my young kids, so it's anecdotal. But if I give my kids an alternative to go play with their friends or go do something else, they'll choose that. And so, yeah, screens are fine up to a certain point. And then it gets back to this cognition idea again, where they're using these screens and it just numbs them, right? And so it's good to set the limits. But this idea that they prefer screens over doing other things with their friends or activities, I just don't think that's true.
All right, I'm going to throw a quick win to Rebecca. Blue light filters.
Oh, TikTok will tell you that these are very, very effective. These are very powerful if 1 or 2 companies makes true, proper blue light blockers. It's important to use them well, use them before bedtime. Some people wear them all day long if they're on screens. So in the kind of 2 or 3 hours before bedtime would be great. But again, the content can be stressful, as we talked about, the stimulating all the wrong regions of the brain that we want to be powering down. So yes, to some extent. Do they work?
All right. I'm looking at what we got up. Next vote up is, okay, when is a good time for, so we're just going to assume kids are going to use screens at some point. When would you have them do it? Like first thing when they wake up?
Oh yeah, bump up the brightness. No, well, this is your parenting style comes into play here, but I don't know if I have a great response for this, but definitely protecting bedtime if nothing else. And if you as a caregiver, and I've been there with 2 very young kids, I'm just desperate some Saturdays to get something done without someone screaming. And I'd leave it to you, but I would say if nothing else, just protect the evening.
This would mirror my use of the Super Friends. Anybody else with this thought on this?
Yeah, I think that bedtime is definitely an important time to protect. Another time to protect is mealtime, especially like family meals, because we know that kids are more likely to overeat while they're distracted in front of screens. So I would say maybe times other than those 2. And there's also some interesting research or gaps in guidance. Currently the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day for most adolescents and teenagers. But there's actually some discussion that for kids who are on screens for really long periods of time where they're sedentary, there actually may be evidence to show that they may need more physical, like the more that you're sedentary, the more you actually might need to be more active to compensate for that. And it is becoming more of a reality, like many of us for work have to be on screens and sitting for long periods of time, and so it sort of is an open question, like for people who are going to be sitting for 8 hours plus a day, do we actually need more physical activity to compensate for that sedentary time?
John, any thoughts to add on that?
No, I completely agree. It doesn't really matter all the data that I've seen, just don't do it before bed.
So next down is the distractibility cycle, and can we break it? And whoever begins this answer, discuss as well your understanding of what that cycle entails. So who wants to start with that?
Yeah, I can take this one. So this is something that I'm actually looking into right now. And so the distractibility cycle, this idea that we're using social media, the way that we like to conceptualize it in our lab is it's a depletion of resources. And so you can think of, we have a finite amount of resources, and as we intake all this social media, all the bright lights, all the sounds, all the pacing and the action, it just depletes us. And so we essentially become zombies. And so the idea is that you need to disengage that person. And in order to do that, you have to give them a suitable alternative. And so what we've been doing is we've been playing around with this idea of creating little 5-minute digital games that'll pop up every once in a while to get them engaged in something. And it'll be like, the pushing the buttons or training of attention or executive functioning memory game or something like that. And it's quick, it's only 2, 3, 4, or 5 minutes. But what we're seeing is that sometimes the kids are actually preferring this, and they're like, oh, I want to keep playing this game. I don't want to go back to watching this passive TV show. And so the really easy solution is just to say, yeah, you got to give them an alternative. The hard solution is figuring out what that alternative is, because you got to disengage their attention. It's easy to say, okay, John, enough watching TV, go outside and play. They're going to say no, right? They're just going to say no. So you got to kind of force it on them. And we're finding that these pop-up games, these pop-up activities are kind of a really good way to do that.
Thoughts from other family members or panel members on You're Now My Family?
But just that is so vicious as you approach bedtime to pull a kid out of. I don't know if I have solutions. I personally just, again, this is kind of a parenting style thing, but acknowledging that it's hard for us too. That's something I talk to our kids a lot about. I have a really hard time pulling myself away from screens too. And that just doesn't stigmatize them by saying, you're lazy, get off your screen.
Just one point is that I think it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So especially for younger kids, I do think that it's appropriate to have more concrete rules, and so like time limits or whatever I think can be more appropriate for 5, 10-year-olds. Whereas as teenagers are becoming young adults, you do want to give them a little bit more autonomy because they'll be making these decisions and having to grapple with these issues just like we are.
All right, I love this next question because I love thinking about ways that we can take this technology and make it a force for better health instead of worse health. I'm sure everybody's got their favorite example. So we'll go down the line. What has been done, or what are you guys working on to leverage digital media to actually improve physical health? Jason, you're closest.
I think that one of the things that we mentioned was that oftentimes screen time often displaces time for physical activity, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so there are people who are developing like extra gaming, so like while you're playing video games, like at least incorporating some active component to it. I will say that I am guilty of really enjoying Netflix series, but because I'm in this space, I made a rule that if I'm going to be watching TV, I'm going to like exercise at the same time. So usually I have my double monitors, and I'm watching whatever, and I'm doing some sort of workout on the side just to break the rule of displacement for myself.
This is actually one of my real passions. I teach classes at the Harvard School of Public Health and Harvard College on the design of effective behavioral interventions. It's kind of my methodological area of expertise, understanding how patients process information, how to design and leverage often marketing and communication theory to use the same approaches that people who want to sell you products use, but to promote your health. So just as a couple examples, we are building some interventions for caregivers in underserved communities in Boston. There's a humanoid that we've programmed to deliver sleep advice, and it's tailored to your personal issues, and it collects your information along the way in a very accessible kind of conversational format. So that's leveraging artificial intelligence. We also are building some kind of cartoons for kids that have specifically been impacted by trauma in the wake of gun violence exposure. Kind of that night immediately for social workers to have, and they're audio-based, because that's the challenge when you're passionate about digital interventions and you're a sleep scientist, to not deliver blue light right before you want someone to be going to bed. So a lot of the kid-focused programming is audio-based, and there are stories, and embedded in that are relaxation activities.
Yeah, so our lab works on this as well, right up my alley. So 2 things that come to my mind. This past weekend, the cancer center that I work for had a fundraiser called the Proudy, and what they did was they incorporated AI into into their activities. And so kids were given the cell phone, they had to go find Waldo sitting around the university campus. And so they'd have a cell phone, and they were given these little hints that they go around like snapping Waldo everywhere, right? So that's like one of the ideas that they were doing. And then in our lab, we're also building this suite of things that they can do with their cell phones, and one of them is a shopping list. So you give them a phone, and you go to a grocery store, and you say, okay, I need you to take a picture of an apple, you got to find a thing of bananas, you got to find, whatever it may be. And just to kind of Rebecca was saying here is we tried to first develop this without screens. So we had we modeled like this sentient globe, almost like the Apple AirPod thing or whatever it's called, and it would just speak to the child. But they didn't like it. They were kind of afraid of it because they were just so used to screens, right? And so that's when we kind of realized screens aren't necessarily bad. We could use them in an effective way. It's just kind of think about how to make them. And so what we do is we use a lot of augmented AI and try to incorporate the screen into physical activities. Kids love that. Kids love the scavenger hunts. Our local pool did it as well. Our local pool used AI to search for bugs. So they would go out and look on the grass, and they would take pictures of bugs, and they would get prizes for different bugs they found. And they absolutely loved that. So that's kind of the things that we've been working on.
If I could get prizes for taking pictures of small creatures, man, I'd be racking
Yeah, I wanna
up.
be in that
You should
study.
see my Instagram. Oh, I love this because this is so powerful and so hard to fight. And I'm going to pitch it to John, I think. Anti-food advertising interventions. Does anything work?
So in terms of anti-food interventions advertising, what do you mean by that? Like policy interventions or?
Yeah, I'm going to read this. I would open it up as widely as possible. When we look at the power of food advertising to affect children's diets in a negative way, is there anything that anybody has done that you're aware of that has countered any of that?
Oh, that's countering any of it. No, and so I think this is a tricky subject, and I don't know a lot about this, but my colleague actually specializes in this, and I've had conversations with her about it. And so the main thing with food advertising is that we know it's so powerful and we know it works. And from a cognitive perspective, what they do is it's not even necessarily about the food. They make it so that it's attractive to young people. There's bright lights, there's bright sounds. It's going to engage them. We know that. And so what these companies have done is they have signed pledges, and they're just self-police and said, you know what, we're not going to advertise to kids. We're just going to advertise to the parents. But anybody who has seen an advertisement for Fruit Loops or for McDonald's knows that that's not true, right? There's no way they've made those for adults. And so I think it's really tricky because we know that advertising is so powerful. We know that it works. And so to combat that, I don't know what you would do. It would be kind of hard to have a public service announcement, which I've seen, which shows well, sugar is bad. Yeah, we know that. Kids don't really care, right? So the only thing that's really kind of been effective is these self-policing policies, but the companies don't really follow them. They say they're going to do them, but there's no enforcement mechanism. So I think that's just more of a policy decision.
And John, let me throw you a quick win from 2 questions down. Does this affect extinct over time? Do kids get tired of watching these ads and stop responding to them?
One ad, sure. Like if you saw the same ad over and over and over again, that would happen. But typically what you see is that because these are affecting the reward centers in the brain, what you're looking for is they're looking for an even greater reward. So, one time they're going to eat 2 cookies and they're going to get a big reward. The next time it's going to be 4 cookies. And so it's all individual, of course. But kids that are at the highest risk seem to get not enough reward, and they want to get more and more and more. And so another researcher who's part of our group, she does a lot of work with genetic susceptibility to obesity, and she finds that there is a certain genotype where kids have just this increased activation of reward to seeing food images. And those kids, it doesn't seem like they get habituated to the reward. They're just trying to get more and more and more. So some kids, yes, we're not really necessarily worried about them. The other kids, who have this genetic susceptibility, we are. The problem, of course, is you can't genotype every kid, so it's really difficult to know which kids are going to be highly susceptible to food ads and which kids are not.
Delaney, did we use it up, or do we have one more? Okay, great. So I think this is a fascinating question because when we look at the psychological aspects of social media use, there's a lot of gender differential in terms of who the user is and what the impact is. And I have never thought of this question before, but it's a great question. In each of your fields, are you aware of a significant gender differential? And Jason, I'm going to guess if there is one, it might fall on you first. So I'm going to start with you.
Yes, actually, it was the topic of our AAP podcast way back when. But yeah, I think it's pretty well established that social media is linked with weight loss goals and dieting behaviors in girls. But I think it's somewhat underrecognized that social media actually can impact boys' body image and lead to eating behaviors and actually exercise behaviors that can also have health effects. So we found that actually more engagement in social media among boys is associated with less satisfaction with one's muscles and more use of performance and appearance-enhancing drugs and supplements like anabolic steroids. And I do think that while there are policies in social media platforms to sort of flag and remove eating disorder content, there's not that same stuff for muscularity content. I will say that physical activity in moderation is good, and we've been talking about how screens can displace physical activity. But I also think that to the extreme, there can be excessive exercise and compulsive exercise, and there are a lot of fitness influencers who promote unhealthy muscle-building products that can be masked as advertisements that can actually lead to detrimental health impacts in boys too.
Guys?
I have to admit, there are a lot of gender differences in sleep later in life. There aren't many at the younger phase. There's small gender differences in media use, video gaming, for instance. And there are a number of issues as we age. Women experience more insomnia than do men, and markedly so, but not as much at the younger phase.
John?
No, there's not. So in terms of cognition, attention, executive function, and memory, we all have the same architecture. There's no difference in the effect of digital media across sex.
Awesome. Well, I think we brought it in on time. I want to thank all of you for your attention and your participation. I learned a lot up here, and I really want to thank our three panelists for sharing their wisdom with all of us. Thanks, guys.